Welcome to Uber Cube, the podcast where we discuss all things Cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka Uber Bear, and I'm joined by my other host,
Stu. Just Stu.
And today we have a very special guest. I'm going to allow this person, see if you can introduce himself.
Well, people often know who I am by my voice before they see me. And in fact, like when I'm out somewhere, if I've ever been recognized, most of the time it's because people hear my voice, turn around and like, is that you? So yeah, I'm Justin Parnell, previously the host of Commander Versus, did a lot of Cube content for the last 10, 11, 12 years, did the 540, did Think Twice. So I've been around the block a little bit. But I'm happy to be here
just on
the Uber. Is the Uber Cube podcast? Is that the name of it? Or
that is correct.
So I have a question to start. So you call yourself Uber Bear?
Yes.
Why is Stu not Stuber Bear?
Well, he did mention that earlier in an episode because he doesn't consider himself as cool as me. Mine's actually Air Force related, and we're gonna have to have a lot of beers or glass of waters to talk about that one. It's call sign ish. Whereas, well,
I've had various names like over the years, like playing video games and stuff like that, and I just got to the point, like, I'm just gonna, keep it simple.
Mine's embedded in a rich history of people. So people don't know this oftentimes. So I wasn't a pilot, but you get cool names. So I knew a pilot one time, F-15 fighter pilot. His name was Shotgun. Badass name, right? We'd all agree. It's because he vomited every time he hit multiple G's. I mean, so there's always a story beneath. So when you watch the movie Maverick, you got to ask yourself, was it really that cool? Did he get it from being awesome?
Yeah, he was going to die. And they already said, like, no, he's dead.
He may just not listen to orders very much.
I think that's canonical, yeah.
It is, in fact. In fact. All right, so, well, thank you for joining our show, Justin. We really do appreciate it. We're honored and blessed to have you on board, and we have a lot of questions. But before we do that, we're going to do the thing that we always do here at UberCube, and we're going to enjoy our beverage of the show.
Let's give a quick cheers. And first of all...
Cheers.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
And this is a special one because
it's my Uber Ale, because I got to call it that, right? And it is a jalapeno pale ale with a dash of raspberry. Took me a couple weeks to make this sucker. We're going to pop it open. Hopefully this one's good, nice and fermented.
There it is.
That's a nice pop. By the way, that is the tell that is not good. You got to hear that, or you got to worry. We don't do botulism here on UberCube. All right.
So let's start out as we have our esteemed guest, Mr. Parnell, with us today. And we're going to start out with a couple of questions. And the first one, I feel like this is a good kind of insight into, the person, the player, what they like. What is your favorite Magic card of all time?
I've had a lot of different answers over the years. And I've been playing Magic for a long time. 1999, so 23 years. Wow. So this has always kind of evolved for me, but as I approach 40 and I really look back on my career as a Magic player, I've come to realize probably over the last 10 years that my favorite Magic card of all time, unequivocally, is Recurring Nightmare.
You're evil. You're evil.
Yeah, of course I am. And appropriately, obviously, an exceptional cube card as well.
Yeah, we just did a recent
probably
episode
has helped
talking
me
about
get
that.
to the point where that is my favorite card,
among other things. I've had my butt handed to me on a platter by one of the guests that we've had on this show, Mr. Christian Anderson, who is actually in the room and listening and hanging out with us. But yeah, built a great deck. Thought, man, this is like 3-0, 4-0, like easy peasy, and just absolutely stumped me, like effortless. It's disgusting.
Mine's Sulphurous Springs. I think, is that Folio that does the art with the little devil inside of the tar pit just chilling out? Oh, it's only because of the art. I don't care about the rest of it. All right, so the next one we have, and I think most of your viewers would know this, but what is your favorite archetype?
So my favorite archetype in Cube, or my favorite archetype
let's go with Cube,
Magic the Gathering?
We can expand across that too, but let's go with Cube first. How about that?
Cube first. So I honestly... I don't have a favorite archetype in Cube. I've been cubing for 15 years.
Yeah.
And I love to draft so many different things. There's very little I don't love to draft. If it's available in someone's cube, I will try. I will make an attempt. I will say that I P1 fixing and fetch lands more often. Okay. So I will end up in 3-color plus decks frequently. So that's probably, in my soul, probably my favorite thing, whether I want to admit it or not.
So you're an open player, not a bomb grab 'em type of player, I guess, if you had to find yourself. Like, pack one, pick one, lands are that's a squeeze for you?
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends what I'm feeling that day. So, like, if I want to attack, I'll take a goblin guide. Pack one, pick one.
Yeah. That's how I do it too. Do you come in with a preordination of a preordained idea of your mood of the day to decide how you? Because I'm guilty of this. I'll come in and I go, today had a bad day at work. I'm aggro. You know what I mean? Do you do this or do you go loose?
I think it's when I open the pack. I know.
Yeah.
Because I have no idea when I open the pack of what I want to do, and then when I open the pack and I'm like, oh no, I want to do this.
Do you find that you gravitate maybe like I consume a lot of content, so I kind of feel that I've developed a bit of an understanding of where certain content creators, and I would say myself as well, tend to lean towards. Certainly blue, I definitely would sort of identify myself as someone that leads towards the blue cards. If I see the powerful blue cards in the first pack especially, I'm maybe not going to try necessarily completely force it, but I will tend to try and lean in that direction. Do you find yourself with like a color like that you really would, start to gravitate towards if you see a sort of a bomb?
Well, people know that, especially in Commander and constructed Magic, that I am the mono black maestro.
Yeah.
And will play black, two color black decks, 3-color black decks, mono black more frequently than I'll play anything else. So I would say I tend to think that the black cards are more powerful on average than other people do. So I end up we talked about Recurring Nightmare, obviously.
Right.
But I will end up drafting what I think are powerful black cards to, I would say, pretty good effect more frequently than not. Although
I would agree.
Blue's quite powerful too.
I think blue's a trap card in most vintage cubes, as in the well dries quickly. Everybody's fighting for what they believe the idea of what blue represents, and it can be misleading, whereas white, red, and black are exceptionally powerful. That's my personal opinion, but I've been thinking about this for a little while. But if you're looking for an open lane, they're kind of sitting there oftentimes.
I think because regardless of what you're drafting, it's never a bad idea to have counter magic. It's never a bad thing to have card draw, right? So there's certain aspects of blue that are just, and I suppose you could make the same argument for all the colors, right? Black, it's never a bad idea to have tutors and removal. White, you've got exile effects and so on and so forth. So, but man, drawing cards is so nice.
Sure. I mean, yeah.
I think as we've gone forward in Magic, colors have homogenized what they're able to do. So you don't have to go outside of your color to get card draw at this point, unless you're playing white. And white is even doing better. In the last 3 years has improved quite a bit. But years and years ago, probably like 10 years ago at this point, maybe not quite, I wrote an article about like the math of cube, of statistical likelihoods.
Yeah.
And I did a significant amount of research. It was like one of my least popular articles I've ever done because it was all math. It was so much effort for me to make. And I recorded so many drafts. Anyway, the point of what I'm trying to get to, I found that on average, for a legacy or vintage power level for cube, that 50% of people were going to attempt to draft blue, which was by far the highest.
Okay.
Yep. You'll get some lulls out of this. Our last episode, you've tapped into two things here. This is always funny when I'm recording this episode. So the first one you just did is our last episode we just released was a good friend of ours, Dr. Jason Brinkley, and we just did it was magical math, and we did the statistical analysis of cube using hypergeometric calculus. We went into the tables and spreads.
Did all the work.
Yeah, we did all this. We did standard deviation. We covered all that. So we just did that. Interesting. Yep. Yeah. So our recent episode, that's kind of what we covered, was the math and magic. And then you just tapped into another one that Stu and I are currently writing. That's always funny because when I'm writing these, I might be listening to another podcast. I'm like, damn it. Because I'm writing one on the lines that are crossing, where magic is basically obscuring the lines between what the color pie does it, where white's getting draw, etc. So that episode's coming soon. So I'm already currently in scripting of that idea. So it's funny.
Beautiful. Love it. Just boosted you up right there.
Yeah.
Just teed it up for you. I knew it was coming.
Do you think that they're, well, on that subject, do you think that in general that they're breaking the parity of the game? That the ideal system that we've all been falling in love with, where, green is ramp utility or stompy and black is the life at any cost kind of, or you understand where I'm going with this, or blue is counterbalance, that's becoming very obscure at this point in the game, that it's all starting to cross-pollinate too much? What are your thoughts?
You want a short answer or a long answer?
You go for it. You do whatever you feels.
The short answer is yes. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
The game's 30 years old. The fact that this game has lasted for as long as it has and kept to the initial ideal of what Richard Garfield had for Magic's Color Pie, which is really the basis of the entire game. That has continued on and been the foundation for how cards are designed for 30 years. And the fact that we've gone on so long trying to hold that together as, you know, as cards are designed is remarkable. But as power creep, which is inevitable in any game, not just Magic, continues, it is very tough for those lines to not get blurred. And that is certainly what we're seeing. And for better or worse, I do think that Commander is accelerating that, because you have a format that is more popular than any individual Magic format that's ever existed, with a higher number of people playing it. Not just because Commander is very popular, but because more people are playing Magic now than they were 5 years ago and 10 years ago, etc. Yeah. So you have people that identify with certain colors or certain color combinations, and everyone wants to be able to do everything. So Wizards of the Coast is in a position where they say, well, we want to be able to satisfy the requests of people wanting to be able to do a lot of things, because financially for us, it makes sense for us to do so.
I would agree with that. There's an opportunity. There's an opportunity cost attached to that idea. Yeah. Carry on.
Exactly. But there is a huge cost to it, because you can't put the toothpaste back in the tub, right?
There is the opportunity. Yes. There is opportunity to break the game for your initial players. You don't know. You have to be innovative. They have to be able to test the limits of innovation, right? So capture, but at the same time, they have to appease, you know, the Power 9 audience, etc. The boomers that are looking for the old cards. We're all old like you there, Justin, so we understand. Yeah. I started playing in late 96, early 97. Stu, what year? Give or take, yesterday?
Yeah, like 2010, 2012, maybe, somewhere around there. I'm definitely much newer to the game. But I agree, and I think it has sort of expanded out, right? So all the sort of the color identity has definitely shifted and become, you know, less constant, if you will, right? So you've got all these different effects that are now available in those colors that weren't maybe previously. Yeah. But I look at it as well, like, you're trying to make the game interesting for the enfranchised players. You're also understanding that the game, like Justin, you just said, the expansion in the popularity of Magic has just gone bananas. Commander has obviously had a great deal to do with that, because, you know, 4 people can sit around a table, 3 people, 5 people, whatever, with 100 card decks and just go at it, which is wonderful. But you're trying to keep everybody happy, right? And I think by trying to keep everybody happy, they're keeping nobody happy, because there's too much going on, right? There's too many sets. There's too much.
Too many formats.
Too many formats. I actually watched an interesting video recently where they were talking to Yu-Gi-Oh players, and they were doing like a card evaluation, right? And they said Yu-Gi-Oh players were like, we cannot understand, we cannot fathom why you have all these different formats in Magic. Why do you need to have all these formats, right? Yu-Gi-Oh, you just have Yu-Gi-Oh. Magic, you've got Standard, Modern, Legacy, Vintage, Commander, Cube, like Pauper.
Gladiator.
Gladiator, yeah.
What is Gladiator? What the hell is Gladiator, Justin? I don't know what Gladiator is. Now's your chance. What is Gladiator, and why do you want it?
Gladiator for Magic the Gathering Arena is a format developed by Ben Wheeler, who was and is a large hand in running the Canadian Highlander format. Okay. And it is essentially 100 card singleton with a restricted list, which is different from Brawl, because that has a commander where you are restricted by color identity. For Gladiator, you're not. So you are able to play decks that are more closely aligned with competitive decks rather than commander-focused decks. And from a competitive standpoint, that is significantly more intriguing to me, especially as I've personally gotten into Canadian Highlander. Yeah. So I want to see that replicated on Arena.
Okay, so what day are you on asking Wizards of the Coast to bring Gladiator back? I've been following you on Twitter. Where are we at?
17.
17, not bad.
I haven't made my tweet for today. I got to change up the times, like sometimes it's early, sometimes it's late.
Can we count UberQ? I'll release on Monday. We'll count that as one of your days. We'll get you some more. We're going to get you there. We'll get you there. All right.
I think that I will. I think that it will happen eventually.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I have a buddy, like I lived in Canada, the guy that taught me Magic, who we played Modern back then, he pretty much exclusively plays Canadian Highlander, and to him, it's like there isn't a format that comes close. It's the best. You get to play with the Power 9, and it's got the point system and all that kind of stuff. I'm not familiar with it myself. I bet it's super cool, but I don't know if is that a format that you play very often?
Yes. Well, it was before I moved.
Okay.
I have not played since I moved.
Okay.
But that's, I don't really know anyone here yet.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's a group that is playing Canadian
Gladiator.
Canadian Highlander.
We've got a couple of people in this rooms that are going to be... you got Canadian, don't you? Oh, we got my buddy Christian hiding in the corner. He's all about it. So we got one for
great.
you. We got one on deck.
All right, we'll get you down to Raleigh, North Carolina.
We'll just have him point it. We'll point your... Well, he's going to CubeCon, so you bring your decks?
Hey, I wasn't planning on it.
We got one in the corner that cares.
Yeah. I don't know. I might. I'm sure. I was planning on taking no decks because I just want a cube. Because the difference, and I obviously, this is a Cube podcast, so I think we're in good company. But CubeCon is something that we have been wanting to do for 3 years now. It kind of came from a side comment when Jonathan Brestoff won the $10,000 cube event at SCGCon in 2019. I interviewed him after he won. And then we ultimately went on and did a small podcast episode of Think Twice. And then we were like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if this was a real thing? And they were like, well, what if it was? So I want a cube. I don't want to play Commander. I don't want to play Canadian Highlander. I want a cube because this is the event that culminates how great this format is, and I want to put all of my effort in doing that. So I'm not going to take any decks.
Yeah, so I agree with that.
Decided.
So I'm bringing 6 cubes. They're yours to play. I've got some nutty cubes.
I'll be cubing all the time.
I'm an insane designer. My artifact cube is actually one of those we talked about before that I'm excited about that one. Yeah, and they locked me in. They locked me in on Monday. I was so stressed.
I am going to make an attempt to be the person that is doing commentary if that cube is featured on stream.
Nice.
I would love that very much. That would be an honor. Nice. All right, so our next question for you, now that we went off on these huge tangents,
what question are we on? 3?
Yep. Least favorite cube card.
Okay. I got a hot take here. My least favorite cube card is Wrath of God.
Where's Day of Judgment's number 1?
I think it is a hate card.
It says Wrath of God.
It's a hate card for aggro.
It is.
Does that include Wrath of God, Damnation, Supreme Verdict, all Wrath effects?
The whole idea.
The whole concept of 4 mana.
4 mana sweepers.
Okay.
4 mana unconditional sweepers.
Okay.
So you're a huge fan of Moat, I hear.
No, Moat is a miserable card. People shouldn't cube with Moat.
All right.
You get a cube with Moat one time because you're breaking the social contract by including that in your cube.
Yeah, I removed it. I tried it. I tasted it. It was horrible. Everybody felt bad. We all walked away mad.
Yeah,
all right.
no one has fun.
I like the cube guys that we speak to, right? Everyone seems to have a very good understanding of what you just said, that social contract, right?
It is a social contract.
It's not just everything all out to win, right? There is a fun aspect, and I think that's one of the things that I love about Cube so much.
Most memorable deck you've ever drafted. There's got to be one that just like, wow, this was awesome. No, all of them.
No, I've like I said, I've been cubing for 15 years.
That's fair.
Like it's really tough to narrow down what the most memorable deck is. There's a lot of decks that I love. I would say, okay, I'll answer the question.
Sure.
My most memorable deck is a cube deck that I drafted in a rotisserie draft. You guys ever done a rotisserie
draft? I have never. No. It sounds like something from, I don't know, Cracker Barrel or something. I don't know.
So a rotisserie draft is when you lay out all of the cards in a cube. Okay. 100% of them. So you got a 540 card cube.
Yep.
How big is it? 540 Uber Bear cube.
Yep. It's the only size.
540 card cube. You lay out all of the cards on tables, usually multiple. And then you snake draft one by one, picking a predetermined amount of picks. Not the whole thing. Yeah. Probably between 35 and 45 picks. It is actually my favorite way to play cube. I think it is the most skill tested, but it takes an entire day because you got to play usually round robin with the other 7 people after you do a draft. Because you don't want to spend multiple hours drafting and then only play 3 matches. That would be very silly.
Right.
So you're in for the whole day. But that's my favorite way to cube if I were narrowing it down to one. And a deck that I drafted, a blue-red tempo deck that was like I would say is like the perfect blue-red tempo deck that I've ever drafted. I was able to achieve through a rotisserie draft, and this has been a powered cube. So getting Ancestral Recall and Lightning Bolt in the same deck,
Oh yeah,
and all of the fix in Snapcaster Mage.
that's gross. That's
It
gross.
was basically it was the perfect blue-red deck, and it's one of those decks I was like, I wish I could just bronze this and just like pull it out when I'm like, I really want an awesome deck to play. So
All right,
that is probably
awesome.
the one that sticks out most in my mind. Everything
awesome.
else, I don't know how many times I've cube drafted.
Yeah, me either.
Many, easily into the 4 digits.
You know, when
for
I made
sure.
these questions, I was thinking I couldn't actually answer any of them for myself, so I just decided to throw them at you. You're the guest, so
Yeah,
give
only
them to
fair.
you.
I
Yeah,
understand.
Yeah, this isn't about me, but I could definitely answer that. All right, so what card do you think is the most underappreciated?
in
card?
Cube.
In Cube. So I just did a JP top 5 on Twitter of this
Yeah,
exact
I know.
topic.
I cheated.
You
I
cheated?
did.
Okay.
I did. I cheated.
So my top 5 that I gave was, and I'll just read it out here.
Go ahead.
Read it out here.
Yes.
Yeah, 100% honest. I cheated. I read your. Go ahead. Carry on, Keebler.
So you read the top 5, and
I
then you
did.
specifically asked me the question.
I did, but I forgot. I work hard during the week. I
think
forgot.
this is a good question, though.
It's a good question. Listeners don't know.
No.
I can appreciate it. So my top 5, number 5 was Clarion Spirit from Kaldheim, which I think is an exceptional card. People have
amazing.
not quite gotten onto that one yet.
Yeah.
A lot of people have, but it should be.
I run
feel
it.
like
My
that
horror
card should be
cube.
a staple.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exceptional card. Whirler Rogue was number 4. That's probably the most popular of all of these cards that are on here.
Yeah.
But I think that card is even better than people still give it credit for. It's amazing.
It is.
3 was Carrion Feeder, and these were all creatures specifically.
Yeah.
Carrion Feeder was 3. Tristani Discordant was 2.
I
And
run
Lunar
that in my
Ilkor was
power
1.
cube. That card. So Selesnya is the most misunderstood of all the guilds.
It is.
That card, though, people don't understand. So I don't run Ephemerate anymore. I wish I did. It goes in and out. But
Yeah, that's
Tristani
what
Discordant
Ephemerate does.
It's disgusting. That card. I've made an army in a can, an army in a can, and an army can with Ephemerate. It's disgusting. So now I run it in my La Femme Fatale cube, which I have an entire cube based on. It's celebrating the females in the magic multiverse kind of thing. Everything, all the art, and she's a house with Ephemerate. It's just disgusting. So yeah, 100% agree. Sorry,
Yeah,
I get excited about that card.
No, ultimately my answer, because I was going to say for Looter Ilkor, there is another card now as of Midnight Hunt that is very similar, the Stowaway. So ultimately my answer is Tristani Discordant. And the reason that this card is so underappreciated is because it's one of the best cards that matches cube power level evenly. This guy.
It's amazing. It's
You can
scalable.
play it in higher powered cubes, and it still holds its own as a Selesnya card because it goes very wide. It fights against bribery and treachery type effects extremely well, which is something that you don't. It's like flavor text most of the time until it's not, and then it's a wildly impactful effect. In
100%
medium
agree.
power level cubes, it can act as a bomb because it provides a significant amount of value when you're able to blink it or play it in something that's combat oriented, and in medium power level cubes like legacy power level cubes, which is my personal cube, it is very much a tie the room together card for Selesnya in a notoriously difficult to nail down color combination for people.
Yep.
So Tristani Discordant is my answer because there's not many good green-white cards, and I think that is the best green-white card easily, and I actually don't think it's even close to the next. I don't even know what the next best is probably the...
Mirari's Wake,
new-
maybe that King, but they're super questionable. She's not
Yeah.
close. She's better.
I think Tristani's the best. I think the second best card is probably Torin.
The trading guy. Yeah.
Also from Midnight Hunt, I think.
Yeah, he's in my horror
Crypt's
cube.
about-
He's a house. He's the one that gives the little soldiers training, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, he's awesome. But those are kind of, I don't know, 4th or 5th rung for me. Tristani is just misunderstood. That card's amazing. She's a house.
It is. It's an incredible card.
The next one is this was actually an important one that I was supposed to do this one. We'll move along these questions. I know we got hung up in the Justin questions. We're moving on timing here. You're interesting. We want to know. But what lands do you run in a cube? I'm all about the flavor of the cube, completing the theme. Who's your artist? Who's your lands? Do they match?
So my cube is all proxies. And because of that, I do not have Magic the Gathering official art on my lands.
Okay.
So I don't have art that appears on regular lands. However, my favorite grouping, if I were to pick what lands I would do, I have two different favorites. One is unglued, just in general. That's right. When I first started playing Magic, I still to this day think the unglued lands are the absolute top tier for lands, just in all facets. And then my second answer is lands from Invasion, specifically one of each type. 3 of which are John Avon art. One is Rob Alexander. One is Glen Angus. Glen Angus Mountain, Rob Alexander Swamp, and the other 3 are John Avon. And they all kind of look together and like work really cohesively. They're all very saturated with the color of the mana that they're producing, and those are the only really lands that I ever use whenever I'm playing constructed or anything.
Nice.
And all of my decks, all of my commander decks, they're all unglued lands. And competitive Magic, I only use those invasion basics.
So in my powered vintage cube, I run the Mark Pool lands, the Shooting Star lands, and I'm in love with them. And then each one of my other 5 cubes, they all have. I do believe, and I think you mentioned. Was it you that mentioned it in the 540? The importance of having lands that at least match your theme. It creates immersion. Like I get it if you're telling a story, maybe you want to have some diversity in your swamps, and I respect that. But at the same time, I like the players. I think really want to see matching lands. It helps alleviate the drama during the game too, to make sure everybody's tapping their lands properly. There's no confusion, etc.
Yeah.
That's
basic lands are some of the most popular cards in all of Magic, and that sounds weird, but different basic lands. People really identify with basic lands, which is why, and Wizards has figured this out over the last few years, why they continue to make specialty lands on a per set basis, because people connect with basic lands.
I agree,
and I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. When I worked at Star City Games as the purchasing manager for 10 years, basic lands were some of our best-selling cards.
Yeah, makes sense.
Just straight away.
I was unfortunately one of your just constant buyers. I mean, you guys delivered on time every time I asked.
I have a long
absolutely
purchase history. On
I got a lot of money spent your way.
So it's not. I don't think it is crazy to say that is a critical part of cube construction, even though it doesn't take effort in the same way that other cube construction does, but it makes you have an environment that is cohesive, as you said, because that's the thing that's going to appear in every single deck, right?
It's part of the story.
When you're drafting, after you finish and you go to that land box, all of these looking the same, and even if they look different, that's also sending a message, right?
Right.
This makes people feel a certain way, and as a cube designer, you are trying to make people feel a certain way, and by selecting the lands that you want to go with the rest of the cube, you're doing that.
Yeah, so
whether you realize it or not.
If you're doing a 180 Bant enchantment cube, like my buddy Christian that we just recently featured on another episode, he's got Theros lands because it has the look and the feel of the gods, or the Nyx lands, etc.
Absolutely.
So it creates like the story. I have a horror cube, so it's the Innistrad land. So it incorporates the players into the draft experience, and I'm all about that. So, and then I know we have dug into these questions, but
you keep digging. Look, I'm here for the digging.
I want to know. The listeners want to know, where's the fun in your cube besides an Excel spreadsheet? Because we know you like CXLs. I do like Excel. I'm an Excel champion too. I get you, brother. I get you.
It's so true. Look, I try to keep my cube updated on Cube Cobra, but I update it in the spreadsheet first on Excel. It's on Google Docs now, so I'm actually on Excel.
Oh,
I think one step up because I can share it with people.
You're now cloud based.
So yeah, gotta get that cloud based. It's better for collaboration. The fun in my cube is not tricking people into thinking they can draft something that they can't.
I agree with that statement.
And I think that's
dangerous.
Critically important, and it's something that I've really tried to work on constantly, because I think it's really easy to lose sight of that when new cards are coming out and you're putting cards in your cubes that might affect archetypes or lead people to believe you're affecting archetypes that you might not be. So making sure that someone does not open a pack of cards in your cube when they sit down to draft for the first time and draft something and feel like later they have been tricked into drafting a thing that doesn't exist.
So we've had this conversation
there's no
in our
traps.
group. Like,
making no traps, that's the fun. I want you to make sure that what you feel like you can draft, you can draft.
If you saw Yawgmoth's Will, what is the first thing that actually pops in your brain?
Combo, Storm.
There you go. That was the point that we actually made on a previous episode. I don't run it. I don't run a storm deck in my powered vintage cube. Just for I support a lands matters, and we've had this debate amongst ourselves. It's not to call Stu out, but Yawgmoth's Will is a very powerful card. But at the same time, I was trying to make the point. it creates this signpost for someone like you that sits down for the first time at CubeCon, plays my cube, sees Young Must Will, and you're now hunting for Storm, and I don't got it.
And that would happen.
Yeah.
Specifically with that card, that would happen.
Yeah,
I would
as you
open
should.
it back with Will, and I'd be like, I'm in. I'm doing it.
Or LED would be the same trap. I'd be like, it's an artifact matters, and you're like, no, it's Storm. So some cards can lead you down that path. But that was a good question about the fun in your cube. I appreciate it. And the Excel spreadsheet, I'm in love with that idea, and I get it. I do it too, man. That's actually where I do all my cuts from. Whenever I get a new set out, everything's in Excel, man. I don't. Cube Cover is fantastic. I love it, but I want to see it on my laptop as I travel, etc. All right.
Yeah.
So now
I got no shame in it.
No, as you shouldn't. Excel is amazing. So we're going to now move on to our topic of the show for the longest Ben-Hur introduction we've ever done in the history of cinema.
Yeah, that was the cold open, everyone.
Yeah, that was like the Star Wars, the scrolling, and the Empire, and the Rebellion, and then went through Rogue One, and Ewoks happened. All right, so Walk the Plank is what we have now called this episode / the Justin Parnell episode. And what we're going to talk about during this particular episode is cards that, focusing on my vintage cube, which emulates, unfortunately, a lot of vintage cubes, that I feel, and maybe the three of us feel, necessarily don't cut the mustard any longer. We may agree, we may disagree. I'm going to call some cards out. It's not intended to be to hurt anybody's feelings or or poo-poo on said cards, but it's just
depends on what card you say.
Yeah, some of these are going to be like, pfft. But we're going to go with kind of talk about where it fits in the mold that we're trying to do on a. Let me set the tone, actually. As a cube curator, and I don't know how you are, Justin, but I like to refresh. I'm every new set, I'm looking for a reasonable cut. My players are looking for hot cards, maybe one or two, maybe two. They're not looking for 30 cards from 40K, but they're looking for one or two, one, old, what is it, the one old eye or whatever, the trample green thing.
I think it is one old eye.
Yeah. I just added him in today.
Old one eye.
Yeah, so when they see that, they'll be like, interesting. So they see in the next draft, they're not expecting it. I haven't told them. Yep. That's kind of the pop and fizz that I do here at UberCube. All right, so making cuts is really hard, and a lot of podcasts and videos have done this, and cube curators over the years. Justin, you said you've been doing this for 15 years. It's a nightmare to cut cards. I think, you tell me what you think, but I think when I first started cutting cards, it was a very emotional response. It's kind of like, collecting baseball cards back in the 80s, and my sister came in and stole my,
Babe Ruth.
Shut up.
Didn't have a Babe Ruth.
So I was collecting the Cardinals. I had a Jose Canseco, and if they went missing, I lost my mind. But it was an emotional response. It's not because I had any value or worth or did anything for my collection. Same thing happens in the Magic card world, where you get attached to, Mark Poole signed a card.
Absolutely.
Or you just kind of get this emotional response where I have to keep it in forever.
Yes.
And then your players don't care. It's about you.
I remember you mentioned that once.
It happens.
And I think this is a good opportunity to bring up kind of the poster child of what was once considered potentially untouchable as far as power level is concerned, but has completely slipped by the wayside from a power level perspective, is Tarmogoyf, right? Should we just let
cutting,
that
right?
I'm just letting
cutting
that
into it like a ninja sword there.
Yeah,
like
I'm not going to slow down. We've been recording for a while, so I think we need some mustard on. I think if you'd have asked people a few years ago, do you think Tarmogoyf, what's oh my gosh, Tarmogoyf 2 mana, it's an amazing value for that creature, right? Is there any possibility that that's ever gonna see its demise in a vintage cube? But here we are.
Where are you at with Tarmogoyf, Justin, for I express my feelings?
I think that often power and toughness on a creature isn't enough. And that's all that you're getting with Tarmogoyf.
And that sort of brings me...
pretty straightforward. But that's not what it takes for a card to be successful in a highly powered environment.
Yeah.
And I have Tarmogoyf in my personal cube because I'm trying to support some graveyard themes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think it's very good.
So I'm going to put it in my horror cube. So let me explain the kind of the pretext to what we're doing here. So when I say walk the plank, I'm a curator of 6 cubes, which I've announced on other episodes. Whenever I cut a card from the Power Vintage Cube, it always finds a home in another one of my other 5s. So in this case, Tarmogoyf's now looking at my horror cube that focuses on, like you said, graveyard synergy, self-mill, where it'll get more respect. The card will actually be insane whenever you start milling yourself. And,
and it's a Lurgoyf, right? Like, I think it kind of belongs in a horror environment.
That's kind of where I kind of get twisted, because I'll have to show you this cube, Justin, when we go to CubeCon. I have just a horror immersive cube. It's kind of like the Cthulhu cube, but a little bit more higher tier and power level. I think you'll appreciate it. But Tarmogoyf will find a place there, whereas in the Powered Vintage Cube, he's kind of becoming a little vanilla for me, I guess, or less interesting, not dynamic.
I think that's a great point, right? The vanilla thing, right? When I first started playing Magic, I played Modern. I had a mono green Stompy deck that actually had some level of success back. Again, this is probably like 8-10 years ago. And it had vanilla creatures in it in Modern. Now, this was at a time when Splinter Twin was legal and Birthing Pod and all that kind of stuff. But the deck had a little bit of game to it. I heard something the other day, and I cannot confirm nor deny that this is either true nor false. But if it is true, it will be fascinating to me. And this is that there are more cards currently banned in Standard than there are legal vanilla creatures in Standard. And that kind of gives you an idea of the design of Magic over the last few years. Like, having a creature just come in, and I'm going to give another example right now, if you don't mind. A card that, when I first drafted your Vintage Cube, Anthony, I was like, man, I don't know about this card. Like, it seems okay. It was Isamaru, Hound of Conda, right? You're getting a 2/2 for 1 mana. That's it. Like, but that's it? Where's the enter the battlefield? Where's the, where's the ETB? Where's the LTB? Where's the, something happens when another creature comes into play or something like that. And I agree that with Tarmogoyf, all it is a beta. It doesn't have any evasion. That was, are we at that point right now that a 2-mana creature that can potentially be a 6/7 just isn't good enough because it's just vanilla?
What are your thoughts, Justin?
I think we've been at that point for a while. It's tough to cut a card from your cube you might have bought for $70.
Yeah.
Or imagine if you bought, the stamped one that from back in the day,
the famous Modern Masters GP one.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the comedy is looking at the price points, and I won't say those on the podcast, of say my Powered Vintage Cube when I first started it, and now that cards have power corrupt. Oh my God, dude. It's thousands of dollars as far as the estimated value of said cube to purchase it, which I do appreciate, because they're getting printed in Standard and in Modern. They're becoming available, and it's not such a, I don't know, what's the word, like a boys club where you can only get access to said card because you were there before everyone else. A click. Now the cards are accessible and affordable, and I do love that nature of the card. He kind of led into the idea. So Stu had actually made a curation, we'll call it constructive criticism, about my Power Vintage Cube. And I do agree with it. It's about the Dragon Hunters and the Ishimarus and the Sky March Aspirants and Soldier Path. Those are all interesting cards. 2/1s, turn sideways, may or not do a thing. But at the end of the day,
they've been completely usurped.
Well, they're not dynamic.
They don't do enough.
I agree with both of you, and I disagree with both of you. What I mean is, a 2/1 turn to sideways still hurts. It takes your life down to 20. The ticker still comes down. I just think they're boring. In my opinion, is that a fair statement? Boring's probably harsh, but players want to see something interesting.
We've always been boring. They're white creatures.
Whoa! You heard it here, folks.
Look, Isamaru
no chill from JP on this.
Even a better example than Tarmogoyf, because Isamaru stayed above rate for longer comparatively.
Yeah,
Isamaru came out at a time where like the best aggressive creature was Jackal Pup.
Right.
Jackal Pup. Jackal Pup, Fire Drinker Setter. You have Fire Drinker Setter in this cube also.
Yeah.
So that's basically like the evolution. But like,
he's on his deathbed, by the way, just so you know. Like, he's on the edge
on his
of
deathbed.
death.
I think your Weekend of Burning's him right now, because he's dragging around a corpse.
He's trash. All right, he's dead. He's officially dead. It's been called.
Thank you, Justin.
So I'm going to put Ishimaru because he comes back from the greatest set ever printed. Would you agree?
Oh God, no. I'm not going to tangent on this. I won't. Stu's got to keep it moving. So anyway, on Isamaru, Like, you can't have a creature that's just power and toughness that's not providing anything else.
I agree.
Yeah.
You could have a creature that's power toughness that is providing something else. Champion of the Parish.
Yeah.
Are you supporting a humans theme? Maybe this if you can get Champion of the Parish to a 3/3, it's 33% better than Usamaru, which is a significant amount for a 1-drop.
Agreed. We did the analytics.
We could. There's a lot of different cards and angles that we could take this from, but just having something with power and toughness, it is not enough for almost every single cube, and I don't think that it has been for a few years.
Yeah, and we try to be. Well, I say we try to be. We are completely like power level agnostic when it comes to our channel, right? All the episodes we talk about everything from like the vintage cube, the most busted, all the way to not to it's not a knock on, but like flavored, theme cube stuff like
Popper,
that,
etc.
You don't need to have those anywhere. Like there's absolutely no need to just have those vanilla creatures anywhere anymore. That kind of it's a bit of a feels bad for me, because you know what? There was probably a time we talked about favorite cards. There was a time where like I would have gone to war for Colonian Tusker. I love me a Colonian Tusker or a Leatherback Bailoff. Like, you remember Leatherback Bailoff when it was
I
like
sure do.
4/5 for 3?
3 pips. I hate pips.
4/5.
You do, in fact, as do
It's
I.
a 4/5 for 3.
Yeah.
That's like it's amazing.
It is,
Like,
but it's not.
but it is.
Oh, there was a time where Wooly Thoktar was a standard staple.
I like that card a lot more than I should. Okay. So we've kind of beat to death the Savannah Lion S cards, the Tarmogoyfs, and then we actually talked about a few more of the cards in that conversation and kind of alluded to it.
Yeah.
It was the moats. And I think people have grown past moat, but anything that actually stops armies from marching, impedes them, that would actually include like a Blight Obedience or something along those lines. Cards that just halt the game, stop it from playing, I guess.
Those are a different group for me, because those are the type of cards that make people want to not play your cube
Correct.
again.
Because you want them to come back.
More egregious than just having a Tarmogoyf in your cube, in my opinion.
100%. No, that's not even your opinion. I would be.
No, that's just
JP
stating absolute facts, in my opinion. Like that is so true. Like the fun and the enjoyment, like cards like that, just they're miserable.
If they absorb the fun out of your cube, then why do I want to play it? I guess is how you should think as a curator and as a player, even, right? And that's fantastic thing to actually tell a player and go, this card really ruined the experience for me. That's not harsh criticism. That's, if you can back it up, that's reality.
It's criticism of the card, but by virtue of the card, the person that decided to put the card in. I'll give you an easier, a more low to the ground example, because I don't think that people are out here putting moats in their cube too frequently. But a card like True Name Nemesis often feels
gross.
the same type of role. Now, I'm not saying True Name Nemesis should not be played in all cubes. I think in vintage cubes, like power cubes, where you can go over it, where you can just ignore combat, that's totally fine. But in cubes that are combat focused, where you are specifically almost all the time having to attack with creatures to end the game, that card can be oppressively unfun, despite its power level and its place in some other type of cubes.
That's how I feel about the swords in general. We did an episode, the Swords of Fallen Favor, our first one, and we talked about how protection in general kind of breaks the fun in cube. It can.
Well, it breaks some of the fundamentals, right? Magic is meant to be an interactive game. It's one player versus one player, right? It's not like, hey, I just get to put this thing on the battlefield and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, that might be great from I'm trying to win the game, but from a fun perspective, it kind of,
I'm all about a smidgen of it, like God's willing, but I don't want cards that are statically just stopping the fun, if that makes sense.
I think God's willing is great. That's
it's fantastic.
Though.
Yeah,
that is actually the opposite. That is interaction.
Correct. Yeah, it's allowing
as opposed to something like I think the swords. I also really dislike the swords.
I do too.
I've completely 360'd on those from like 10 years ago.
So there was a time where you liked them. So what made the shift in the mentality with the swords? I'm interested to know.
Well, at first there were only the two.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Well, I think. I guess 10 years ago there were the set of 5 when you had Feast and Famine.
Sophie.
Well, I was saying the Shadows over the Scars of Mirrodin. Body and Mind.
So that
Feast and Famine, War and Peace.
Yep.
And there was a time where I was like, oh yeah, I can't wait to have all of these, and then they just very rarely created dynamic game experiences. And this is when I had them in a powered cube. And even in a powered cube, they're either not good at all because equipment is not good for something that someone is trying to achieve, or they make for uninteractive games or unfun mini games. Even if you're able to deal with it, putting all of your resources into trying to make sure that you're like playing around the Sword of Fire and Ice game when you're a 3-color deck that includes blue and red, like that's not really where I want my cube to be. And the more of them that there are in the cube, the more of the cube experience in general becomes about that. And I don't think that that's fun.
No,
it's fun when you have it and you have the sword.
Yep.
But that doesn't translate for the entire experience for the rest of the draft. And often when you're playing a cube over and over again, everyone's going to have the experience of being on the unfun side, which means that those are probably cards that shouldn't exist in your environment.
Yeah,
you just summarized.
And I don't
Storm.
mean that as a blanket statement, but for me, that was my experience.
I love that you just
that was
used
Storm.
Fair enough. I love that you just use a term though, the mini game, right? Because I feel like that's an important discussion, right? When you're creating mini games, and I know that we've had these discussions.
I hate
dungeons and
stupid initiatives, and I don't need all that.
Yeah, like the mini game outside of just what's happening on the battlefield. That's it's tangible. It's easy. It's present. Like how much do we want to sway from that?
Yeah. So I played Final Fantasy VII, and I enjoyed that game. But then you went to some casino back in, I don't know, 98 or something on the PlayStation 1. And there was this thing where I was racing these birds, and then I bet on them. And I'm like, mini games. And there was Dr. Mario with some mini game. I'm like, I don't need this in my life. I'm not a mini game guy. Monarch, Initiative, Dungeons.
Monarch?
I don't need all these
All
layers.
right, I'll grant you the rest.
I don't want
but
layers.
I
I want top level of the onion. I want the freshness. I don't want to go 6 tiers down in the game. I don't want to know what. I don't have to read your card, Justin. Going, what layer are you in right now? What does this do to me? And how does this impact me? Yes or no?
I am not a mechanical purist when it comes to Magic, so I think I'm on Stu's side. Like some of those are okay for me, but it's the point where it does create too much mental load.
Yes.
Like dungeons, I think is like one far two step for me, because once you have a dungeon card, you're basically laying out this map of all of these options of what the game could take, and it's like I don't want to have to do it as your opponent. You just do whatever you're going to do, and I'll just accept.
I switch off at that point when it comes online. Like, whatever you're doing, just do it.
Choose your own adventure.
If you're killing me,
choose your own adventure.
I'm good. Whatever. Yeah.
Whatever gate you end up, whatever bats you fight, I don't care. Just let me know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of tricky, like because there are good cards, especially in the Baldur's Gate set for Cube. I cannot remember the white card that gives initiative.
I wanted to run that in one of my EDH decks.
White Plume.
I won't on principle.
Please don't.
Principle.
So we've got some other cards we actually listed. We've got these are some oldies but goodies, and we'll just name them.
I'll be the judge of that.
Exalted Angel. I'm not a fan of Morph in a cube because I just don't like it. I don't like what's the other thing besides Morph where you actually prepay into it? Foretell. Any of those ones where you're kind of signaling, because in a cube environment you have very limited options. It's not hard for your players to read the table and understand predict what you may like. Willbender is Willbender is what I'm trying to say in so many words.
Always
right?
Willbender.
And I love Willbender, but it's always Willbender. That's how I feel about these type cards in a cube environment. Mm-hmm. Catastrophe. Do you like Catastrophe? Let's go old
Catastrophe.
Justin.
I did. For a long time I loved Catastrophe.
I like it because you know what it does? Or what it can do?
Gives you choices.
It can destroy all lands.
He's a LD kind of guy. He's the guy. Are you an LD guy in Commander, by the way? How do you feel about it?
No, in Commander, absolutely not.
You should talk to this guy then. He is your nemesis.
I got a friend that's an LD guy, and we don't play Commander anymore. And I told him, I said, if you play this deck that just destroys all of my lands again, and it's a Loro deck, which is one of my least favorite Commander decks.
Oh, no, my Massline Destructions are friendly. They're very friendly.
It actually is.
If you cast an LD spell, I'll never play another game of Commander with you.
You don't like Jocko Hops? You don't like Jocko Hops?
5 years.
5-year penalty box?
No, it's permanent, but it's been 5 years so far.
Permaban.
Eventually it'll be 10, then 15, etc.
He's a hockey player. You got to put him in the ice box. You can't just put
That's right.
You got to ward him, Justin.
That's right.
All right. we've kind of
2 minutes for destroying all of my islands. Son of a bitch.
I'll see you on Wednesday. The next
What
one
was
we
the
have
initial question? I feel like we have
catastrophe.
consistently, catastrophe. I mean, I did like catastrophe. I don't even think catastrophe is good enough anymore. It's too slow.
Yeah,
No,
6
that's
mana is
kind of
way
the
too
point.
much.
That's kind of the point of this episode. Is it kind of moved on? They've died. We've poured one out. For
I mean,
them.
I like the idea of catastrophe, but it's also it can't not be too slow because you can't make that effect. You can't have the catastrophe card text. You can't have it cost white 2 because then it's just strictly better than Wrath of God, and then it's probably in a weird spot where it's maybe not good enough at 5. So I don't know.
Let's move on to blue. Let's cover blue. Blue's a fun one. And I'm going to ask Justin for his feelings on this one. This is actually one that I feel like it's in my cube still. It's in my horror environment because of what it does. But powered vintage for me, I'm transitioning out. And that would be Forbid. What are your thoughts on Forbid as a Magic card?
Forbid is a messed up card.
You loves it.
That's a super messed up card.
He loves it.
I think I love Forbid. I'm mixed. I actually don't think that Magic will move away from a power level perspective for Forbid ever being not good enough. Because in general, we're moving to the point where cards are easier to get, cards are easier to draw, and the power level of cards, like impact cards, is like condensing at like 4 mana. So Forbid is always going to be on the south side of like big game-changing cards, especially with Planeswalkers. It's mainly Planeswalkers is what I'm talking about.
Right.
Forbid is just so messed up. I don't know. I truly, honest to God, believe Magic will never move away from Forbid being good. I don't see how it's possible.
I would agree 100%. And one of the reasons that I always think of, and I have a deck that plays cards like this, right? One of the reasons is, as we've seen, like we've talked about power creep on our previous episodes, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit today. The more that power creep happens, the stronger those individual cards get. The individual cards become less of a big deal, and it's becomes more bomb centric, if I may sort of coin a term, if you will, right? So I don't really care about some of the cards in my hand. If I've got sort of the ability to lean on one card a little bit more than the others, do I really care about discarding 2 cards to be able to counter a spell twice?
So for me, it's been edging for me as a personal curator because I feel like cancel happens more than Reanimator does. Like that, I feel like
do you
this
have
is
cancel though? You're never ever going to play cancel.
That's the play.
If you have one or the other, then you're never going to play cancel over Forbid. You have an option.
Well, that's how I feel like this actually has play lines. Is like a cancel for me. I mean, as a control player, I don't want to empty my hand unless I'm a Reanimator target. Correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but that's how I feel.
But you could be.
I will own that. I will own that.
Yeah, and that's not like some kind of fantasy situation, right? You could be legitimately, you could have a Dimir Reanimate deck, and the ability to discard 2 cards is like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I want to be doing right now.
Yeah, that is even a step beyond how I feel about Forbid. Because that's using the discard to your advantage. I'm actually more talking about the face of the card, which is the countering the spells portion and using some of your resources to do so. I think if cards like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and other continuous card advantage cards are consistently good enough for Cube, that Forbid will always be good enough.
Yeah.
And if you're playing Forbid for the cancel, for saying this is a cancel and then like a small fraction of the time
Reanimator,
I can get it back.
Yeah.
Then I think you and I are evaluating that card and playing it differently.
Yeah, I would agree with that because that's how I'm telling you the truth. That's how I look at it. Is like it's cancel that I might reanimate something with, not at all cost. I need to stop this from happening. I guess it's a different viewpoint. Whereas
I look at it as I can have very few counterspells in my deck because my goal is to get to a state on turn 7 where I can play a 4-drop and cancel their bomb or their removal spell in response, cancel, and then be able to buy it back and continue to do that over the course of the rest of the game until the game is closed out.
Which I've had done to me. I believe this is actually, correct me if I'm wrong, it's pauper legal at one point? Or
it's uncommon. It's uncommon.
It was uncommon, yeah. So it can
and how many times do you realistically think that you will need to discard two cards from your hand to buy this back in order to win? Like, I'm not looking at this thinking, oh man, do I need to discard like 10 cards to cast these 5 times.
I think it's like 4. I think it cast it like 3 times.
I've
yeah,
seen it, I've
2
seen
or
it be
3 times at
obnoxious
the
in Commander.
absolute most, and then suddenly it's like, man, the amount of tempo that I've generated and gained from a card like this, I don't care about the cards in my hand. I've cared about, what I've generated before I've cast this spell, like with my Planeswalkers, with a Teferi, with a Jace, with whatever, and yeah, you're not coming back from that.
All right, so the next card we're going to talk about is actually Mole Drifter, and I have personal mixed feelings about this. I see this as a divination with wings that maybe you'll ephemerate, which I no longer run, or bounce, or blink, or etc. Otherwise, it's a 2/2 flyer on value, which I get it. For 1 blue and 4 colorless, you get a flying when Mole Drifter enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards, and has an evoke value of one island and 2 colorless, right? So you can actually do this thing at a sorcery speed. I've cut it. I actually cut this a while ago because it felt like divination with wings.
When you say you've cut, and
I've removed it from my powered vintage
from your powered vintage cube,
even though it had beautiful art, that weird looking dragon art that came out a while back that was gorgeous. I had to let it go from an emotional status. I had to let it go, but I just don't see the value in this card anymore. What do you guys think?
I don't think on its face Mole Drifter is good enough if you are not supporting ways to interact with it outside of just casting it. However, I think it's wildly easy to do what I'm saying as far as support. Ephemerate, other blank, reanimating things that have low power. It's so simple to add those into your cube, and then when you have that, Mole Drifter, I think, becomes good again. But if you're not doing any of that, it's certainly not good enough.
I think in a peasant environment or an unpowered environment, this card's probably bonkers. But when you start getting to the power 9 level, it may have outlived its time. That's my personal opinion.
I think if you're doing blink, it's still good enough.
Fair enough.
I think if you're not doing blink in a non-powered but rare environment, it's peasant. It always will be, because that's all about card advantage. That's the entire game for peasant and pauper cubes.
Agreed.
So this is a needs support. Can't do it on its own. Still very good if it has support, in my opinion.
No, I agree 100%. I think it's a sort of time in the limelight has come and gone. And I don't know if this almost seems a little counterintuitive for me to say, right? Because I like playing blue. I like to draw cards. I think Ancestral Recall is the greatest card that's ever been printed. But as the power level increases, and maybe this is more a meta sort of philosophical conversation, does the necessity of cards like this to like just draw cards and get action, is that maybe reduced just a little bit by the fact that the cards are just so much more powerful now than they were years ago? Because I think about, the Magic that I was playing 10 years ago compared to the Magic now. Like, the Magic that I was playing 10 years ago, yeah, it was the cards in my hand were good, but I needed a critical mass of things, right? Regardless of the deck I was playing, right? So cards like Mole Drifter, where the evoke for 3 is fine. You play it for 5, you get 2 cards, you get a 2/2 flyer, that's fine. But nowadays, I'm not quite as reliant on just trying to get as many cards in my hand as possible, because there's so many massive like bombs that are available, regardless in the color. So maybe that's another reason why this card just doesn't quite have the appeal that it did.
Okay, well, yeah. So kind of summarizes the point on Mole Drifter. Vidalcan Shackles is another one that I actually want to cover in the blue section, or we're going to call it Proxy Blue, or the hidden blue card.
It's blue.
It's
blue. You gotta have islands.
Totally blue.
This is a card that kind
it's
of
more blue than Mole Drifter is.
It is, in fact, because of the requirement that it requires a number of islands for you to capture the card. And I think you said this earlier. This card felt like an anti-aggro card to me. It was the blue way of capturing the Savannah Lions and then pulling them over to your side. And that was the turnoff or the appeal for me for this card, in addition to the color requirements, right? What are your thoughts on this one, Justin?
Absolutely agree. It's a card that is wildly powerful in aggressive matchups at a very, very low cost. And I think that those cards are generally not fun in cube. If you wouldn't put the card Timely Reinforcements in your cube, then, and I think most people can agree you wouldn't do that, then your Vidalcan Shackles is going to have a very similar play environment. And I think it's actually really egregious for this card to continue to exist in so many cubes, because it is either completely insane in a matchup or it is not good at all. And those are the type of cards that I'm trying to avoid in cubes in general. And it is often not fun when it is absolutely dominating. We want to talk about a mini game.
Yep.
The entire game becomes about Vidalcan Shackles. If I'm playing an aggro deck that doesn't have a variety of levels of combat abilities like menace and flying, and that also, if you're just playing non-flying creatures, and you got a Vidalcan, my opponent has a Vidalcan Shackles, then the game becomes about that Vidalcan Shackles.
That is why I cut it as a fundamental. It felt like it was, I don't know, it just was breaking the actual fun in my cube. And jumping through hurdles to actually do said breaking.
It's
I don't know,
so
it was 2 parts.
unfun. I didn't enjoy
it.
I dislike Vidalcan Shackles, period, as a card. I don't like that. I don't like bribery. I don't like treachery. I don't like any of those cards. I'm going to put that out there.
So we're going to kind of tie off blue right there. There's some other blue cards that we could include in this story, but we'll kind of move past that and go through some other ones. So let's move on to black. This is kind of an oldie.
Nope, they're all good. Move on to red.
I started scrolling my mouse wheel like, yes, sir.
Spoken
that
like
was authoritative. I like it.
Spoken like a true Bob enjoyer.
Skin Render. I love this card. I do. I have an affection for this card. I'm in love with the idea of what it stands for. Chupacabra just came and knocked it out of the ring.
Yeah, I was going to say February 2018 is when Skin Render breathed its final breath.
That is the day the music died for Skin Render. Yeah, I felt the same way too. But this card is still gorgeous. So back to, I want to emphasize the point we talked about. Just because it dies in one cube, in my particular environment, it tripped over to my horror cube, and I'm like, yeah, I like that sweet art. I will now accept you because it's pretty an awesome upgrade. So that's. I also actually want to bring up another point too. When I cut cards from my particular environments, I put them inside of a binder. I mark what card I traded them out for. I annotate the date, and then I know what I traded out for. And then later down the road, when it comes back, I'll be like, "Well, welcome back, Sun Titan. We now have a Lands Matters in our cube environment." And I'll know the date it left and the date it came back and what I chose it for. It's actually just an idea I've done for a while. I think it works. What are your thoughts on that?
You have Sun Titan in this cube, though.
I do. I love it. It's
I just want to make sure. No, I know you got Black Lotus in the cube, so Sun Titan needs to be in the cube.
Yeah, it left for a while.
That is one of my favorite vintage cube 1-2 combinations.
Yeah, it's disgusting. The next one we have, and we know Justin loves all black cards, but what do you think about Phyrexian Arena in a cube environment?
Oh man. Well, there's a new card that just came out.
I saw it.
Black Market Connections.
Yep, sweet.
I think is kind of kicking Phyrexian Arena to the curb, but I like Phyrexian Arena type of Magic.
I do too.
So and like Skin Render, not renderer. Like Skin Render, it needs to be played in a lower power environment. The Skin Render is still a fine card, but
I agree.
It's been knocked down from this is a reasonable staple in a legacy or a better power level cube because there's just better options.
Yeah, it's flatter power levels. That's kind of so. Again, when I kick them to the curb, they don't go to the curb. They just go to another cube, and those cubes are generally flatter on the power base, like unpowered, just thematic cubes. That's where I push all these.
So Phyrexian Arena, a lot of the same.
I love this card, but
I love the card too. I absolutely love it. It is one of my favorite Magic cards.
Oh yeah.
So I like to be playing Phyrexian Arena type Magic where it's just very grindy.
Yep.
I'll trade life for resources. I just need a little one extra per turn, and we're going to try to run each other out of cards, and I'm going to ultimately have more cards.
It's in my artifact cube. You'll see it at CubeCon. I did leave it
Wonderful.
there for that. Yeah, I love it.
But exactly what Stu said prior, you have to maximize the spells that you're casting, not just having the most of them.
Yeah.
And Phyrexian Arena does give you some more options, but it also it doesn't matter as much as it used to.
It occupies
there's not as much of that trading back and forth in modern Magic.
It occupies a weird space for me at 3 mana, because you know what else I could do at 3 mana? I could play a Teferi Time Raveler.
Play a Liliana the Last Hope.
Or a Liliana of the Veil.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure. Or you can, Dark Ritual and just cast all these.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
You know, look at the option, or a Narset. Like, hey,
you guys are just having
I
too
could
much
have
fun.
one card, or I could have a Narset Parter of Veils. Like, that's not even a card I get right now. It's a card I get on my upkeep.
It's not wrong. Like I love Arena, but that's just true. That's just true.
That kind of summarizes Black in a nutshell. We just kind of cover some key cards there. I'm actually going to cover a couple of cards, probably 2 of them in red.
Yeah, you stay where you are because I'm going to die on a hill for the first one.
Yeah, so let's start.
This is...
So I have my feelings on the
war
first one. We're going to stick with this first one as far as it getting...
man.
Yeah, here we go. All right, ding, 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 ding. Let's go, guys. Let's go. All right.
Introducing first. In the red corner.
Koth of the Hammer.
Oh, boy.
I just think that's relegated to mono red decks. This card is amazing. So...
You cannot tell me...
I'm going to tell you it's amazing, but not amazing enough for me.
Stop. Stop.
Go ahead.
You cannot say a card is bad because it's relegated to mono red decks. All right,
I love red.
Even go there,
I love me some
right?
red. That's it's the best color in Magic, by the way.
But I actually agree with Anthony on this.
Woo! Got one.
You don't think that's good enough for?
I think it's too narrow.
It's just that it's so narrow.
Yeah,
it says 2 red is the casting cost. You know what the real casting cost is? Red.
Yes.
Because you can only play mountains in your deck.
Correct.
Powerful? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is absolutely powerful enough. There's not a more terrifying card that if you can't deal with planeswalkers and your opponent plays it down, you're like, I have to kill this in 2 turns or I will lose the game.
Yes.
Yep.
Straight away.
Yep.
And there's something to be said for that. From a power level perspective, as long as mountains are accessible in your cube, Koth is going to be good.
Yep.
But it is too difficult for Koth to see play in a cube where I am trying to encourage people to be creative in drafting and deck building. Koth is not a creative card. It's incredibly straightforward. It's one of the most straightforward, powerful cards that exists in cubes on a regular basis. And for me, that is a knock against it. It's a pretty big knock against it.
I would agree with that 100%.
If someone's not drafting a mono red deck, Koth goes 15th. Straight away.
So do you think that this has a home in the vintage cube and shouldn't ever see play anywhere else?
I wouldn't. That's a bold statement.
It is
to say it shouldn't
we're
see
bold
play
people.
anywhere else.
I think it's a commander card for me. Mono red commander deck. Go nuts.
I think it's a terrible commander card. I would never play it.
It's not. It doubles your mana. I'll use it in the heb.
Do you use it in the heb?
No, but if I
There
did,
you go.
it would be
it's not
amazing.
a commander card. Then. It's got to be like the greatest deck for it.
I think the power level of the card and the constraints that it requires of deck building is most appropriate in a vintage cube because aggro is really asking you to be monocolored aggro to compete with non-traditional ways to win in a powered cube.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. And I agree. And I like the card. I think it's a super cool card. And I agree. If you alt that card, like it's GG. The plus ability to start, swinging with mountains is super powerful. But yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it will continue to be good because it's a planeswalker that's good at fighting other planeswalkers, and those will always be good historically.
Yes.
And if anybody's wondering what any of these cards we're talking about, I assure you they'll be in the show notes. I will attach them to the Google Drive for our podcast. So you're like, what is Koth do? It'll be there. You can find it. I'll link it to the show notes. All right. So let's don't beat red up too much because I'll defend that because I'm a redhead, whereas Justin was defending everything with the black. That was my baby.
Redhead. I like
that.
I'm
all about it. Yeah, I'm all about I'm all about it. Yeah.
Influence.
So we've already talked about. We kind of jumped the shark and we talked about Goyf earlier on. Everybody's kind of expressed their feelings on Goyf. Let's move over to a new interesting card. Let's talk about Thrun the Last Troll and whether or not this individual needs to actually be in power cubes. I'm on the fence. Stu's saying nay.
I'm not on the fence. Get out.
No.
You're getting out?
It's just, it's like, don't.
It was great.
First of all, it's
10
it's
years
a
ago.
But Justin, it can't be countered. I know.
It's just it's a 4/4 for 4. The worst part about Thrun is it tricks people into thinking that it's good because you're like, I'm going to get the blue or the black player. They can't counter it. They can't kill it. They also can't do. You playing a 4/4 for 4 in 2022. That's not good enough. It's not even close to being good enough.
Nope.
You know what? Sadly enough,
I don't care that it can be regenerated.
I don't disagree with you. That's why it's on the list. but it was fun to trigger both of you guys and get you going. But I recently defended it in our Wildfire episode, but then Stu made me feel dumb because regenerate's not really that great with Wildfire anyways. So we've moved on past it. I'm cutting it. These are on deck to let go. Let's go over one that's actually...
you can have 8 mana. It's fine.
Yeah, 1 billion mana. Just let it sit in there.
What if instead of having Thrun the Last Troll, you just had any creature with 5 toughness?
Yes. Or any planeswalker that just does.
In this scenario.
What if you had
anything?
A leatherback Bailoff?
There you go. Better than
There we go. My boy has a home
podcasting right
finally.
Here's an interesting one that I hear mixed feelings about. Plow Under. I do not like Plow Under. I don't like what it represents. I don't love this card. What do you think, Justin?
So my personal feelings and my feelings about Cube are wildly different. Personally, I absolutely love Plow Under as a Magic card.
Yes.
I love it. That's when I started playing Magic. Urza's Destiny was the first new set that came out after I had started playing. So those cards will always hold a very special place in my heart. But I haven't cubed with Plow Under in a long time. I think it's another one of those cards that's like a bad play experience, and it's either way too good or it's not good, and there's no in between. And I think those cards in general are just not good to cube with. So Plow Wars are crazy powerful. If you're on the play and you have a bunch of Land War Elves and you cast it on turn 3 and you set your opponent back to the Stone Age, and you're on 6 mana when they play basically their first land out again. But is that what you want to be doing? Is that what you want your cube to be about?
No.
I say
I don't want to be
not.
doing that as a player. Like, I have no interest,
I agree.
regardless of what cube I'm playing. There is no world in which I am getting excited about, even if it's turn 2 or turn 3. I'm not like super excited, even if I've got it in my hand, like, oh wow, I get to put my opponent's 2 lands back on the top of their library. Like, I'm not enjoying that. My opponent certainly isn't enjoying that. So
But you don't mind twisting me, so I'm going to call shenanigans.
I like doing that to you.
Yeah.
But all the people that I like playing with, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, so it's what the card represents. And granted, I run Mind Twist, full disclosure. But Plow Under, I think when you do Powered Vintage, you don't have to min-max on the fun level either. You can actually have a powerful environment and still make sure your players are enjoying themselves. And you can limit the awfulness. You don't have to go full... all the worst cards ever printed in Magic and call it a vintage cube.
I think the difference is like Mind Twist is like if you get Plow Undered on turn 2 or turn 3, they're putting them back on the top of your library, right? So you're going to draw them again. The next turn or 2, you can start trying to rebuild. Mind Twist, your hand is gone, right? There's no coming back from Mind Twist, right? It's just get out of here. The power level is wildly different between the 2 cards, right? I am more than happy if it's an early, like turn 2, turn 3, like now you have no hand, I'm scooping up and playing the next game. I'm probably not going to do that with Plow Under, but I don't know. I think the power levels are very different.
What do you think, Justin?
I think that Plow Under is more egregious than Mind Twist, not from a power level perspective, but because there's not a theoretical counterplay to it. There's nothing you can do.
I agree.
At least with Mind Twist, what if you turbo out your hand is a Mox, a land, a Grim Monolith, a Mind Twist, and then 2 other bad cards, right? And you Mind Twist me for my entire hand on turn 2. I have 2 lands. Well, I'm playing a Reanimator deck. What if I'm just live to draw, Exhume, or Reanimate? We can keep playing. You don't have a whole lot going on. You generally play a lot more resources to get value out of Mind Twist because you're trying to push your mana as fast as you can to take out your opponent's future resources.
Yeah.
Yes.
Plow Under is not that. You get to keep all of your resources, and in most cases, because it's green, you're able to push forward with the creatures that you probably use to cast it. And there's no counterplay because you don't have any. They're taking away your land resources, not your future hand resources. So I actually think Mind Twist is totally fine, and Plow Under is miserable. And in a Vintage Cube, it's not even good. Like you could Plow Under turn 3, and it's like, well, I had a Mox and all this artifact mana, and I wasn't planning on doing playing a regular game of Magic anyway. So
yeah, and you're drawing those lands back in the next turn or 2 anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it's not.
I think that Plow Under is
it's
on the worst side of both halves of the coin.
Yeah.
So we kind of covered Plow Under and we covered T-Goif and all these different ideas. Let's talk about Justin. I want to know your thoughts on green aggro. I'll go ahead and make my stance. Outside of my horror cube or any of my thematic cubes, I'm not personally a proponent, but do you think it's something that's actually coming to life as far as cubes are concerned? It seems like we're getting a lot of stuff added to the suites. I mean, we're seeing Ascendant Pack Leader, and I mean, we already had Experiment 1 and Kessig Prowler and Pelt Collector, and it's getting bigger and bigger. It's like they're pushing it, and people are starting to adapt it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're getting there. I want it to be a thing.
Yeah.
But I think that the issue is the needle keeps moving for white and red at the same time that it is for black and green, which are the colors that are kind of struggling to have a solid footing in a lot of cubes for having aggressive packages. If you take green right now in 2022 and you compare it to red aggro from 2012, it's just as good or maybe a little better. But the problem is, when they print Ascendant Pack Leader, you know they print for red? Ragavan.
Yes.
So you have all of these cards, and it's like, oh, well, what about white? Oh, well, white just got like Usher of the Fallen and Esper Sentinel, which is not even like an aggressive card, but still plays into the strategy. So the cards keep pushing farther in white and red, which are the traditional aggro colors, compared to black and green. Black just got two of its best aggressive cards in the last couple of years. Knight of the Ebon Legion is an incredible card, and I think Evolved Sleeper is also really, really good.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to test it yet.
There's just so few. There's just so few of those cards comparatively, and aggressive decks are all about redundancy.
Yeah.
So you need to have cards of equivalent power level for those decks to be successful, and they just don't exist comparatively to the other colors, and you kind of have to have them balanced.
What about if I was to say there's one of the cards that I really like is Questing Beast, and given that there's so many like really powerful, we talk about, you know, Little Teferi, Renan 6, things like that, is maybe a card like Questing Beast kind of holding the torch right now for mono green, and maybe like I would say that card, and we actually, if you remember some time ago, you actually pick one, pack one, a Questing Beast, and I got my butt handed to me by mono green, right? And it was on the back of two Questing Beasts, and I want to say like turn 3, and then maybe on turn 4, and I couldn't deal with it, right? So is mono green aggro so fragile that maybe it's just being kept relevant by, you know, mana dorks exist, and maybe there's a couple of top ends like that are kind of keeping it a little relevant, but outside of that, it just doesn't cut the mustard anymore.
I love that you brought up Questing Beast, because I think you are 100% right. And mono green aggro should not exist in a traditional, I don't want to say should not exist, but as it currently stands, doesn't exist in a traditional sense as it does in white and green, where it's not like you're not playing 1-drop, 2-drop, trying to fill your curve out.
Yep.
You're utilizing green's best attributes, which are Land War Elves and Friends.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So your goal is to get to the mid game much faster than everyone else with creatures, and to be able to play out 3 mana, 4 mana, 5 mana threats that are acting as your aggro creatures, but they're a lot beefier. You just have to put more deck building resources in doing that. But for green, you want to do that anyway, because that's where the power is.
Yep.
So
I agree.
I absolutely think that Questing Beast is a very good torch carrier for green aggro. And there's actually a lot of those cards. There's another card from Midnight Hunt, the Uvenwald Oddity.
Yeah, I run that in my horror cube. The card's amazing. I actually like that a little bit more than Craterhoof Behemoth sometimes. I'm not going to lie to you. I know they're not the same, Craterhoof Behemoth versus the Oddity.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I like it more because it has the front face. It's really fast, and then it actually does the...
There's also Tovalar's Huntmaster, which is a fairly recent card as well. That's a super powerful card.
It's a 6-drop.
Green Grave Titan? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're spitting out little 2/2 wolves. Like, it's pretty strong.
All right, so we're going to move over to our colorless section, and I've got a couple of cards here that I'm going to highlight that I feel have either moved along or they've outgrown their time within my cube. And the first two are I'm going to put them hand in hand. And it's going to be the Ratchet Bombs and the Powder Kegs. And I do enjoy both these cards. I do love them. I feel like they had a good, but at the same time, I feel like they were anti-token strategies. They were breaking that idea. It was another one of those silver bullets for a whole nother theme, the Tristanis that I was trying to do. And then someone would have, it was breaking too many synergies. I don't care for these type of cards in my cube. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that from a gameplay perspective, if you're looking for cards that are going to see widespread play and you want that type of card, Blast Zone is the card that you want.
Blast Zone's
because
great.
That's the land. And
well,
that's very good.
That
as
adds
opposed
+1 and jumps over tokens, though. Blast Zone adds
which is exactly why. Because
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Ratchet Bomb, that is a card that can theoretically deal with anything, but it takes so long, so it often ends up being on obviously dealing with the lower end stuff.
Yeah,
but again, that's not in my experience. You don't want to have too many cards that are dealing with the aggro strategies, because it's
Yeah, it doesn't allow them to.
I don't want to
thrive.
tangent on this, but
Yeah, no, you're right.
Aggro's got the rough end of the stick for a
It does.
long
It has the rough end of the stick.
time.
But does it? Because I've been
Yes, it
MTGO
does.
White Weenie
Absolutely.
is destroying people.
Aggro has got the rough end of the stick in Magic for a long time, in my opinion.
So now it's his time.
probably for the entirety of the time that you've been playing Magic, Stu.
Probably from the time that when I started playing was a great time, right? I don't know if we talked about this on a previous episode, right? But I know Pleasant Kenobi did a video about it, right? Shout out to my boy Vince, representing UK. Do you remember a time in Modern, right? There was a green, white, black creature called Siege Rhino that was like the best.
Yeah.
It was like Birthing Pod's poster child, right? That was like incredible. You gain life, your opponent loses life. It's like super, 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 super powerful, right? And that was, no, I don't want to necessarily like a pure aggro strategy, but like look where we've come from then to where we are now. Like that 4/5 Leatherback Bailoff, that, you know, that 2-mana Colonian Hydra, those were viable cards, and they're just not anymore.
I agree. I actually tried Siege Gang, or the Rhino, actually, in my cube for a little while. I was doing the whole tricolor, doing the shards.
Too many pips.
Yeah.
Too many pips.
You have
Too many
to. You have to learn, don't you? Though you don't actually just start out there. I was copying everybody else, if I'm actually confessing here. But then eventually become your own curator, and you don't care what people think.
Because if you've got
but
that
I think
many
that takes
pips,
maturity.
if
in
you can
doing
get that
this.
many pips in your mana base, you know what I want to do? I want to cast Golos. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
When I've got 3 or 4 or 5 mana. I want to play Golos.
I have, so in my
Golos.
cube, I think I have like 2 3-color cards,
Yeah.
and then I have 1 4-color card, and then 1 5-color card. The 4-color card's Omnath.
I run
The 5-color card's
Omnath.
Golos.
Yeah, I
you know
run
why? Because those cards will beat you over the head
Yes.
if you're able to cast them.
Yep.
Yes.
You know what's not beating you over the head? Siege Runner. You're like, all right,
Whatever.
I'll have to. It's inconvenient because I have to change both of our life totals. And that's
That comes to something, isn't it? When it's like, man, like pressing a button on my iPad or writing the numbers of the life total. If that's the biggest inconvenience to a creature, like, you know, it's like that's rough. That is rough.
So I think we've touched a little bit of controversy here. Maybe some of these people are making people cringe. I don't know, people's feelings.
to do it.
Let's go into a next one. Let's do a cringy one that I know is coming to its time. I don't want to admit it. That is Karn, the Liberated. Legendary Planeswalker Karn.
no, I don't think we're close. I'm on Karn's side for this one.
Yeah, I think so. I think the fact that you can potentially exile 2 permanents for 7 mana is actually going to keep this kind of relevant for
I
you.
don't like you right now because you're completely switching on me. He just did that. He literally hates on Karn every time we're not on mic. I'm going to call.
I don't like Karn
There you
because I
go.
don't like getting my permanents.
It's been consistent with what the message Stu has been saying for this entire podcast, which is you need to choose your cards to spend your mana on. And when you are doing that, when you're playing 4 and 5 mana cards, Karn is very good because it's a 2-for-1 for the whole world, for everything. Whatever your opponent is doing, it's going to be a 2-for-1 at minimum.
Yep.
And there are also situations where it can be better than that if it's not able to be removed
Agreed.
on a regular schedule.
No, so let me give you the debate. This was the debate. You walked into this one. You stepped on this one. Whether or not we brought you to it, I don't know. I said I would channel out Karn.
I wouldn't.
I'll leave that right there. I was going to channel out. I was going to just jump into it. I'm going to cast Karn. And he said it was tomfoolery and that I shouldn't do that it was a waste of channel, and that I should be blight stealing with channel. But I feel like if I can exile a permanent with channel, and now I'm getting ahead, getting an advantage. What are your thoughts on that? Is that crazy talk?
Well, first of all, this is a trap question. Because
It is.
I think channel is one of the trappest cards in any cube
Thank
that
you.
it's in.
But I love it.
Sure. And you know what? You're thinking the 5% of the time that it works out. You're not
Yes.
thinking the 95% of the time that
Yeah,
it doesn't.
it feels good. Like that one time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to your question because I don't have that. I don't have those 2 cards in my deck. At the same
I'm just
time.
trying to get you to fix a
I love
debate that
Karn,
we've
but I
had
don't like channel.
forever, and I'm just not going to
You're
win.
not winning this, Anthony.
I'm not going to win. I give up. I concede. I think Karn's great. He's going to stay in there. He's foiled.
Do you? Well, hold on. We got to stick on channel now because now
Oh,
you've
we
brought
got
this
channel.
up. So
Yes,
I'm going to
let's
take the
talk-
tangent
yes.
over.
Get some channels.
When you're drafting channel, what else are you doing? Are you drafting? Are you
Blightsteel?
drafting like broken cards? Like you're just playing a big
Mirror.
like 2-for-1 planeswalker with channel. Like
Oh,
if you're
I
going to
mean,
pay most of your life,
yeah.
like you should win the game on the next turn. Not
But Okay,
I'll like slide it in. I like to play aggro decks when I'm playing Channel. Like I like to put the Emrakuls and Blightstills and stuff like that in.
is that aggro deck?
Yeah,
Yeah, like why not?
yeah, that's winning the game. Though.
Do you
No,
know
that's what
why?
I'm saying.
Because
like, Stu's,
that's kind of fun for me, right? That's going really far back into like my like early days of Magic when mono green Stampede turning creatures sideways. I was very new, and the concept of like just banging people with these experiment ones and Strangaroot Geists and Colonian Tuskers and Leatherback Bailiffs. Like that's going back to my roots, right? So
this is the no one has brought up Colonian Tusker more than Stu in this podcast.
It's fantastic.
Proud.
It's fantastic. I'm going to name this episode the Colonial Tusker.
my boy, Colonian Tusker. 3-3 for 2. Back in the day.
When there was a debate, the person that won the Vintage Cube Championship last year took Pack 1 Pick 1 Blade Splicer over Channel. And this is when we were recording the 540, Ryan, Overturf, and
I would do it.
Yeah.
And both of us were flabbergasted that people were like thought it was a big deal, because to me, I also don't think it's close. I absolutely think that Blade Splicer is a better card Channel, but
Like,
that's a
not
whole
even
different
close.
topic.
Not
I
even
do not
close.
like Channel. I think it doesn't work out so often that people get starry-eyed for the few times that it does.
Yeah,
Sure.
I would agree.
no.
Blade Splicer is such a I'm a mono white aggro,
Yeah.
Vintage Cube, mono white
That
aggro.
is
Is if you're playing to have fun, draft whatever you like, draft Channel, that's fine. But if you're playing to win, you're drafting mono white, no doubt.
Which leads me to Emrakul the Promised End, which I think you guys actually did discuss on the 540. That was one of your episodes, am I correct? Where you kind of debating whether or not it was overrated?
I love Emrakul, but if people play it inappropriately. Okay, there's two sides to Emrakul. It's the including in your cube side, and I'm all for that. Drafting it, people just will draft it and put it in any kind of deck, and I think that is often wrong.
Oh, no, I would agree. So do you play it for the delirium aspects of it, or are you trying to cheat it?
Well, you could do either. But you have to be doing one. You can't just be like, I'm going to cast this for 10. Because some people do that. They're like, yeah, I'm going to have a land, an instant, and a creature in my graveyard. I'm going to cast this Emrakul. No, you're not. You're gonna die with Emrakul in your hand is what's going to happen. So you have to be doing one. You have to be either cheating it into play, or you have to be aggressively making sure that you're filtering your graveyard. Emrakul is best when you are kind of doing a little bit of both. When you have cards that can fill your graveyard, but you can also have cards that can get creatures back out of your graveyard. So when you mill it, you can just get it back later, and then you can cast it for 7.
So aside from the ratchet bombs and powder kegs of the world, we've got another interesting artifact, and it's going to be Curse Scroll. And for 1 colorless, you get an artifact. And for 3, you can tap it, name a card, target opponent chooses a card at random from your hand. If he or she chooses the name card, Cursed Scroll deals 2 damage to target player or creature. What are your thoughts on that one, Justin?
My thoughts are you have brought up the card that I have taken out of my cube the most number of times. And it's because every time I make a new cube, or sometimes that I'm just like, I think this is good enough, I put it in, and I'm disappointed 100 times out of 100, and it breaks my heart because I'm a Magic player from the 90s, and I want Curse Scroll to be good because I remember when Curse Scroll was good, and it's just not anymore. You just can't pay 3 mana to maybe deal 2. Or you can't even pay 3 mana to definitely deal 2. I think we're way past that in Magic.
I think it's a neat card. The art's gorgeous. I can see the allure. I think this is just more of
Can you
nostalgia.
imagine if you had to discard as the effect of Curse Scroll?
Yeah, that would be sweet.
That'd be
I'd
better.
actually do. I would do that.
Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
a card that I would design that would give me a job at Wizards of the Coast, designing cards?
Are you doing an application right now?
Maybe.
I don't feel like they're accepting.
Maybe.
All right. So
It would be better. I would play that card, and then before I took it out, but I would try it.
well, so that kind of wraps up. We've kind of just covered the cards that we feel either in my personal opinion, and I think the groups have had another one here, they've either outlived their lifespan within my said cube or other environments, or I think maybe they've peaked their level of nostalgia so much, or the specialty art, or that artist signed it, or whatever, foily, etc., and that we grip on that too much sometimes. I'm thinking about myself by saying this, that I don't want to let it go, right? And I think as a curator, you kind of mature over time. You decide maybe it's time to move on. But what's gone is never forgotten. It goes into a binder, and hopefully everybody else is like me and they have a cube addiction, and they'll move it over to the other cube. Or cursed scrolls of the world will continue to evolve. Justin, any thoughts before we start moving through the summer here? Any cards that you think have just outlived their lifespan? People hold too tightly?
Oracle of Moldiah.
I don't know how I feel about that statement.
Interesting.
It is a 2/2.
I think that it just... We were talking about Questing Beast a second ago. That's like that's a green 4-drop now.
Oh, you know what? You're right. I'll concede.
There's too many ways. There's too many other ways to get ahead on your mana, and Oracle doesn't provide enough auxiliary impact on the game anymore. And that is a hard truth for me to accept. I still try to play Oracle. It has been, even in my current like Legacy plus power level cube, it's been in and out because I want that to not be true, but in gameplay, when I see it, it generally reinforces the fact that I think that it is true.
That's an interesting point that you make, and maybe a good question for me to ask, right, to both of you guys. As someone like I am designing a cube, but my time with Magic is much shorter than both of you. But how much of an emotional response do you feel that you have, and not just necessarily even to the cards, but also to the level of value that you feel that they provide for, like, the mana investment, for example, right? Because I can certainly look at a card like Oracle of Moldiah and think, man, I remember a time when I looked at that card and thought, man, that's a really freaking cool card, and that's a really good effect for what the investment is. Where does the mentality take you guys when it comes to not just designing the cube, but also, like you're talking about, the very, very difficult decisions when you're cutting cards, like, you know, with those powers and those cards that you're evaluating, it's got to be so tough to look at them and think, man, there was only a short time ago where I looked at that card and that was a great card, and now it just isn't anymore. Like, that's got to be so tough as a curator.
Yeah, I think that so many cards are released now. So many cards every year. There's been more cards released in 2022 than any other year in Magic.
Yep.
And before that, the record holder was 2021, and before that, it was 2020, and before that, it was 2019.
Yep.
And you know what's going to be the record holder next year?
2023, baby. Yep.
And because of that, we see a proliferation of redundant effects across all cards in Magic, which is what most cube designers are pulling their cards into their cube from, which is everywhere, which is pretty unique to Cube. And because of that, it is incredibly difficult for cards that are just good enough to stay just good enough for very long, because they're going to get usurped in really small ways. Like, I think that the card Augur of Autumn, which is about a year old now,
I love it.
That was like the nail in the coffin for Oracle for me, because I'm like, this is just a better card. Like, I don't get to play an extra land, but it just provides so much more. It has an extra toughness, it's a mana less, and then like later on in the game, I can actually play the creatures which is what I want to do, not just playing lands. But cards like that are getting printed so frequently. I got all these. I know we're not recording, but I bought all these Warhammer decks, right?
No, we're recording.
Justin is holding up Warhammer decks for our audio audience.
The people aren't going to see the visual part. But there's so many insane cards in these precons. This isn't even a set. This isn't even like a regular set of Magic that came out. These are 4 precons.
Yeah, they're disgusting. They're the best
and the
precons
impact
ever
that
printed.
These are going to have on Cube and Commander is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And this is between Dominaria United and Brothers War, which just came out. Like Dominaria United just came out, and Brothers War we're already getting previews for. How could things not get usurped? It's only going to be the best, or you just have to say, you know what, I don't care, and this is an opinion I quite respect. Say,
yes,
I don't care. This isn't good enough anymore. This is the card that I love, and I want to cube with it. And I say, right on.
Well,
love that.
And that's actually true. It's not only that I don't care and I love it; it's the financial impact. I'm trying to keep up with these sets, and
yeah, man, you have 47 cubes. Of course it is.
God, yes, it's getting painful at this point. My wife is like, oh, you gotta get a job to pay for these cards. It's getting nuts. Mail day is every day at the Adams house. Other than that, one of the suggestions we wanted to make was when these cards are removed, because cutting cards is an emotional experience. It takes time. Mm-hmm. You grow into it. Your friend circle will give you feedback, and you're like, oh, man, but I really love this card. It's signed by such and such artist. Consider moving it into a binder. This is an idea. Putting a label on the outside of said binder, what you cut it for, put the date down on, or put it into another cube. It may come back, i.e. Sun Titan that came back for my Lands Matters package, or as you talked about, Black Lotus, which I forgot about, if I'm being truthful. And it's your cube. It's your style. These are my personal choices. As you notice, there were 3 people here, and they did not all align on my personal cuts. And then you have to decide as a curator whether or not you're keeping it fresh or you're keeping it nostalgic or somewhere in between, right? Like that's always it's a juxtaposition between the two. You can blend it. You'll figure it out. I mean, it's do you. I mean, it'll work out. Justin, I appreciate you coming on the show. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Been wonderful.
I could probably do this for hours. We don't even have to record. We're just having a good time here, just chilling.
We'll just do this once a week. We'll just hang out.
We would like it though. We'd give you the opportunity. Besides getting Gladiator, pushed really hard. If you want to put one more throw in for that, but would you like to do your socials? How people can reach you? How they can find out about what you got to offer?
Absolutely. So the place I am most active is on Twitter, and you can find me at jparnell1 on Twitter. I have also been streaming about 4 days a week. I'm actually I had just stopped working at Star City Games, moved on from that at the end of August, and I'm starting to make content full time. I have not fully gotten into the groove of doing so, as I'm learning a couple of different programs that are significantly smarter than I am, which is I definitely undersold that when I convinced myself to do this. But as I'm continuing to do that, I've been streaming. You can find me at twitch.tv/jparnell. I also have a YouTube channel that has nothing published to it yet. And there's no URL because, of course, I don't have anything published. There's no subscribers yet, so I can't have a nice little short URL name. But on the top of my Twitter page is my card information, which is like, I think some people use Linktree, but it basically has all of your links of all of your stuff. And that has a link to my cube, has a link to all of my commander decks, because I know people often want to see those things, as well as all of the content that I'm making. So that is where I would like to direct people to hit that up and check out what I've been working on as far as content and the other stuff that I have personally, like my cube and my commander deck. So that is where I would point people to. It's at the top of my Twitter, at jparnell1.
Yeah, so I just want to go ahead and say thank you again. Stu and I want to really truly appreciate it.
This has been phenomenal.
Yeah, this is actually fun, man.
I
love it.
I enjoyed the conversation.
I don't know how many other people that you've had on the show that have done like 300 plus episodes of podcasts before. Yeah. So I love talking, as you guys probably figured out. I can talk for hours.
Yeah, me too. This just gives me joy.
It does. We one of the things that I was so excited about was we do this. This is what we do. We hang out, we'll play Magic, but there'll be times we'll just, hey, Anthony, what you doing? Hey, come over and hang out. And we'll just be doing just this. We'll
love it.
Hang out, talk about Magic, spend 2 or 3 hours just hanging out, talking about the cubes, talking about EDH, talking about Magic philosophy, talking about whatever the case may be. So to me, this is like a wonderful way to spend the time. All right, so thank you to everyone who's hung out and listened to this episode and all the episodes previous. We really appreciate you guys spending time with us, and also we really appreciate a 5-star review on your chosen player. Really helps us out, getting the exposure out there, getting this podcast to more listeners. If you would like to reach out to us on Twitter, you can find us at UberCubeMTGPod. You can always hit us up via email, ubercubemtgpodcast@gmail.com, and we also have a link to our Discord, which is Ubercube. We'd love to have you guys come hang out and chat about Cube and Magic and all that good stuff. Other
than that, we're going to say the thing that we always say here at Ubercube is
Happy
cubing!